Hi everybody, this is Miss Niebling,
And Miss Price.
and today we're going to be learning about how to explain figurative language.
So let's take a look at how we do that.
Well, your goal ultimately is to be able to take your knowledge of all the definitions of the 7 types of figurative language that you've already learned and use those definitions to help you explain what an example that we give you actually means.
So what we did is we came up with a formula that we thought might help. So we start with the definition of the figurative language that we already know, and we're going to add in the information from the example we're given.
Those two pieces combined are going to allow you to explain what the example actually means.
Sounds pretty simple, and I think it is. So let's take a look at some examples and we'll see how it works.
The first example says, when the gates were opened, the mob surged forward like a burst dam.
If you read that, hopefully in your head you figured out that that's an example of a simile. And we know that a simile means that we are comparing two different things or people, places, or ideas, and we're using a comparison word such as like, as, or than to make that comparison.
Next, we need to take information from the example that's going to help us. In this case, it's important to be able to take the way the people moved in the mob and how the water would surge if a dam broke open.
Right, and so we're going to take those two ideas, the definition that we know and the information for the example, and we're going to create meaning. So our explanation might sound something like this.
The example compares the way the mob surged forward to the way the water would burst out if a dam had just opened up. It is a simile because it used the word like to make the comparison.
Right, and one thing we have to remember, whether we're talking about a simile or a metaphor, is we need to include both things that are being compared. We can't just talk about one and ignore the other.
That's right. So this is an example of how we would explain the meaning of a simile. Now we're going to look at a different type of figurative language and how we can explain a different type.
This example says, I have a million things to do today.
And hopefully you guys realize that is hyperbole because we don't have a million things to do today, even though it feels like it.
Yeah, all the time. We know the definition of a hyperbole is just an exaggeration that we'll use in order to make a point.
That's right. So now we need to figure out what's important information from the example that we need to include. In this case, we need to include the exaggeration part that there's a million things to do in one day.
So we're going to take the definition again with the information from our example, and we're going to put it together for our explanation that will sound like this.
The example is showing an exaggeration about how many things someone has to accomplish in a day to make a point about how busy he or she is, because we know that no one can have a million tasks to do in one day.
Yeah, and it feels like it, but we know that's not true.
So let's do one more example about how we can explain a different type of figurative language.
And this one is, the car's engine began to wheeze reluctantly.
All right, so hopefully that sound effect helped you to figure out that this is clearly an example of
Onomatopoeia! And I know that sound effect really helped me because I know the definition is that words that sound like the sound they're making. So wheeze really does that.
That's right. So we take the definition and now we add in what information is important to use. And in this case, it's the word wheeze.
So we get those two things, and here's our explanation.
The example uses the word wheeze because it is a word that sounds like what a car engine might sound like in real life.
Right. Onomatopoeia is pretty simple because they're just words that sound like sounds.
That's right.
As a reminder, there are 7 different types of figurative language. We just showed you how to do 3 of them. You do need to know how to do all 7.
That's right, because remember, your goal is to take the definitions of all of those 7 types of figurative language and be able to put into writing and explain the meaning of examples that we give you.
And don't forget to use the formula. Take the definition that you know about figurative language along with the information from the example you're given.
And that will give you an easy way of being able to explain what the example actually truly means.
Right. So enjoy and good luck.